For the better part of my life, I've professed to be unapologetically me, and I've encouraged those around me to do the same. Oftentimes, though, as a sociologist, I think about the reciprocal relationship that exists between agency and structure in our society that may inhibit a person's ability to actually do that. As we think about agency, the autonomy that an individual has over the development of their own self identity to be their true selves, in relationship to the structure of our society that is affected by socialization and social interaction, as people seem to tell us what is acceptable and unacceptable, right and wrong, good and bad. One of the things I got asked a lot early on, and I still get asked it from time to time in interviews, is what's it like to be gay in West Virginia? And the reality of it is, I have no idea. I am incredibly insulated by the walls of West Virginia University. I am protected by the city of Morgantown. I have no idea what it's like to be gay in Hampshire County, where I spent my childhood and adolescence. I don't know what it's like to be gay in Lincoln County, where I spent the first 5 years of my life. I don't know what it's like to be gay in Cabell County, where I was born. But I'm conscious to the reality that no doubt, even though I experience harassment, bullying, homophobia, people have it far worse than I do across our great state. After the worst day of my life, one of my colleagues left a sign at my door that said, "Be you, be true, be bold." I look at that sign almost every day in my office as I wonder, what capacity do we have to actually do those things? Be you. I remember the first time someone called me gay. I remember, in particular, the reactions of the other kids. I didn't know what he meant. I'd never heard that word. It wasn't something that my parents said. I'd never even heard it among my peer group. But I was a little kid. I remember going home after school that day and looking in the dictionary to find a definition. We didn't have the internet back then, so information wasn't at our fingertips as easily. But in that brief little definition from the dictionary, I was actually able to see an identity that spoke to how I felt. I'm relatively confident that I could have went to my parents and I could have said, "I think I'm gay," and hopefully, ideally, they would have been comforting, caring, and nurturing. I wasn't so sure about my extended family. I definitely wasn't sure about school. This is where everything had happened. So I stayed in the closet. Fast forward. 2 months after I started here at WVU, Matthew Shepard was savagely beaten, tied to a fence, and left to die in Laramie, Wyoming. I remember thinking back as I was reading these things and wondering, how did Matt have the courage to be out? Judy Shepard, Matthew's mom, started crossing the campus advocating for LGBT hate crime legislation. She came to a local university, and I knew that I needed to be in the audience. As I sat there that evening, I couldn't help but think about Matt, how courageous he had been, the reality that he spent an entire night tied to a fence and managed to survive. 3 days later, after they had found him, he obviously, and subsequently died. But I also was standing there thinking about Judy. Here was this woman who was going across the nation advocating for hate crime legislation after she had just lost her only son. And I couldn't help but think about my own mom. Would my mom have the courage to be championing these issues? Would she have chosen to use that response to my death? And I think I knew the answer. And so I fell deeper into the closet. Fast forward again. 13 years. April 4th, 2011, started like every day did for me. It was a Monday morning, and I was on my way to campus to start a day of teaching. And I called my mom on the phone, and the conversation started just like normal. How's the weather? And what did you do this weekend? And I responded, I feel so lonely here. I think I could leave class on Friday and kill myself, and no one would know until I didn't show up to class on Monday. And as I was out on my evening run, I decided that I was actually going to do it, that I was going to kill myself. I remember climbing to the top of the bridge that connects downtown Morgantown to Westover. And as I stood there looking over the edge, considering what's the best way to be successful, I couldn't decide what way to do it. I'd left my headphones in my ears. I don't know how long I was standing up there. Several songs had played. But eventually a song started playing from the Broadway show Wicked. For whatever reason, that song played, and it's possibly the only reason why I'm alive today. 4 days later, I was having dinner with one of my friends here in town. And as we sat there, she was probing me with questions. Are you okay? What's going on? Can I do anything to help you? And I got a little teary-eyed, and I looked across the table, and for the first time, I said the words out loud. I said, I'm gay. And she started to cry. I started to cry a little bit harder. Eventually, we were both crying pretty uncontrollably, and maybe it's a good thing because the server gave us free dessert. I think she knew something big had just happened, and boy, was she right. Be true. I had finally told my truth. And so over the course of the next several weeks, I came out to my closest friends. I also came out to my parents. By midsummer, I came out to everybody that I thought mattered. WVU was hosting college game day here on campus in late September 2011. We were playing the LSU Tigers. About midway through the game, a young man who was in one of my classes approached me, visibly drunk, but uttering gay slurs, threats, even invoking Matthew Shepard's name. I had shown the Laramie Project in class just a few weeks earlier, as I had done every year since I started teaching. He said that he and his friends had joked about Matthew shepherding me. And I knew what that meant. He and his friends had joked about killing me. Oddly enough, it wasn't the first time that someone had threatened my life, and it definitely wasn't going to be the last. But I knew I had a responsibility in my truth. And so I went home after the game, I sat down at my keyboard, and I just started typing. I remember calling my academic mom, as I call her here on campus. She was a professor that really had helped me over the years. I remember calling her and asking her if I was committing career suicide. And she encouraged me to write. And I remember that Monday morning as well. Around 9 a.m., the messages started rolling in. The article had appeared in the Daily Athenaeum, our school newspaper. And by 11 o'clock, I had heard from every major administrator on our campus, colleagues, former students, current students, friends, people I didn't even know about. Things were about to be different for me. I recognize abundantly the reality of my privilege. As a cisgender white male who is college educated and upper middle class, I know where I exist in our society. I recognize, though, that if someone like me could be targeted with harassment and threats, and if you want to call it bullying, then no doubt so could our students. I've also prided myself as a faculty member in being abundantly aware of what's going on in my students' lives. I understand the statistics that 18 to 25-year-olds the second leading cause of death for them is suicide. I understand that for LGBT individuals, they are 3 times more likely than their heterosexual peers to attempt suicide. I understand that transgender individuals, according to a recent study, 43% of them suggest that they've attempted suicide by the age of 25. But the reality was, for me, it wasn't just about protecting people from bullying and harassment that could result in suicide. It was partnering with people on this campus who came before me. We started having town halls where we discussed diversity, inclusivity, equity, raising awareness all across the state. As a sociologist, though, again, I go back to the idea of how we define deviance. The powerful and privileged group have the capacity to define that for us. So as I look into the intersections of our society today, I look at the way in which the powerful groups are able to label deviant people who say Black Lives Matter. People are allowed to label women deviant who say, I am no longer willing to accept the sexual harassment that has invaded the institutions in which I take my education and my work. I also think about the deviance as we look at the women who wear hijabs, or the individuals who are bilingual but speak English as a second language. All of them are labeled as deviant. Be bold. And that's something that I have abundantly tried to do over the course of my life. December 1st, 2016 was the worst day of my life. My boldness so threatened a group of students at this university that they created a fictitious narrative with hopes that I may be fired, dismissed, or otherwise. They shared this information with a visitor to our campus who engaged in about a 6-minute evisceration of my character. This video went viral. Still to this day, if you Google my name, the first resulting image that you will get comes from this speech. The thing about it is, though, again, there was hope. Our students immediately went into reactive mode. Social media exploded. A hashtag with my name in it went viral. Still don't necessarily know what that means. Administrators spoke out in support of me. My colleagues did as well. Current and former students did too. The reality of it, though, was for me, this support through social media only lasted a couple days. What was going to last for me on the other end was nearly 8 months. For 8 months, I was constantly harassed. Emails, voicemails, social media attacks. For 8 months, I received death threats, some of them scary because they were so close to home. It was like some of these people actually knew who I was. Some of them a little bit more distant. There was one in particular that I have to memory that lasted nearly 6.5 minutes, where a man from Arizona detailed my death in the way he could hang a fat pig like me from a tree, the same way that the deer he hunted could be hung from trees. For whatever reason, I couldn't delete the voicemail, and I kept listening to it. He wasn't the only death threat. They lasted until about mid-July of this past year. The reality of it for me, though, was I was remaining bold. I was remaining true to who I was, and I was remaining unapologetically me. And that was bad for some of these people. I felt alone in many ways. On a daily basis, I invoked one of my hero's words. I'd met Dr. Maya Angelou earlier in my college years, and I got to hear her the night that I would come out to my 2 best friends who are here in the audience today. Every day for 7 months, I had to quote the lyrics from her In Still I Rise poetry. You may shoot me with your words. You may kill me with your eyes. You may cut me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. And that's the reality of it. I understand that I'm extraordinarily ordinary. I know that nothing that has ever happened to me is in excess of what has happened to other individuals. But I encourage you, to be true, and to be bold.